Nacho Average TableTalk. Woohoo!
Welcome to Nacho Average TableTalk. I'm Zach,
And I'm Pepper.
and today our topic of discussion is we're going to talk about first player in games and uh, games that have ways to obtain first player for future rounds if they're games that have rounds in them, and kind of what we think about them. So we thought about a few different ones, looked through our collection. There's some that are kind of, I feel like there's kind of some oddballs, and then there's a lot of them that kind of do a similar thing. Um, but yeah, we're talking about those. Let us know in the comments below if you have any games that have kind of a weird way to figure out first player for like a following round if it is a game that has rounds in it. Not necessarily just determining first player to start the game.
Yeah.
I think some games have weird things of that too, but that is not what we're talking about here. But yeah, I think what made me think of this personally was recently I played Nova Roma, and this one had, like a lot of worker placement style games do, has this action where you can, well, in this one you have to pay for first player. Usually in a lot of like a worker placement game, you're not paying for it necessarily, but you're using a worker to get it. This one you're activating action, and then you can choose if you want to pay for it. So then you'll be first player the next time. And in addition, it allows you to take an action by also paying. So there's like these, what is it, whatever. I never remember the names of these things in game, but it's the track that you're going up, kind of gaining fame or something throughout the game.
Yep.
And then you're spending that. You have to spend 2 to obtain the first player, and then you can spend 1, 2, or 3 in the game. You're kind of can get power in certain ways, but you have to spend it in order to take any of the other actions in the game. So you're potentially getting first player, and you're still getting to take an action.
Yes, a wild action.
Yes, a wild action. So you get to choose, and I thought that is done pretty well because I've just thought in games like it always. I don't know. I don't. I get strategically it's probably smart, but I feel like our game group meta, most of us never go for that first player typically, unless we are playing sometimes those bigger games.
Yeah.
And if the player marker does not move automatically, and you're always being last, you might eventually take it. But that is not our typical thing. We're not usually fighting for that in most games.
A lot of time it's like, well, I guess they're going to have it for the rest of the game.
Right. So I just thought that was a good way to approach it because you still feel like you're getting to do something. But then, and it still costs you something. So it's not like an easy thing like, oh, I'm going to do that because I get a free action anyway.
I think that would make it a little too powerful to be able to get a wild action. Still having to pay for that, but then also just like freely get it, the first player. I think that'd be a little too much. So I think they really,
I think they handled
got that about perfect.
Yeah, really well. Because that makes it so that it's not like, well, it's obvious. I'm going to just take that. To start the round or whatever. So I do like that quite a bit. And it also does not allow the player that was just first player to take that as their first thing, so you can't like automatically do it. You could take it with your second turn, which is nice. So it's not like it blocks you from doing it at all, but it at least gives everyone else at the table a chance to take it first.
So, but in using that action, how often are you going to pay the extra to take the first player token? Or is it just nice that that action does have something else with it?
I think that's
I
probably
think I mostly still just did the other part, which I think you can do.
I would agree, and I think that is a good point. Although I would say, especially in our plays of it, we've played at 2 players. So in this game, it does too. The first player, if no one does claim it, it does still move to the next player. So it's a little bit of a different thing. You're likely going to be the player that already has it that would be trying to fight for it, likely, unless the other player really wanted to be first. I don't know. In a 2-player game, it's definitely a little bit different.
Yes.
But it still can be important. I think we still might have used it like once or twice, maybe. But yeah, I would say that because it's got that cost associated with it, that can make it a little tough sometimes. I think it really just depends how far you are up on that track. And I think if we were playing it at 4 players, it might be more likely to use that one. than I typically would for maybe some of the other ones, but maybe not. I'd have to definitely play it at that player count to see. But yeah, then I guess going to some other games that we kind of thought of that you can claim the first player token, and these are a lot of those ones that I don't know that we necessarily always are taking it. We were thinking of Rajas of the Ganges, Lords of Waterdeep, Champions of Midgard, I think are some.
Yeah.
And yeah, with those ones, I don't believe Champions of Midgard gives you any other benefit. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah,
if it
do
does,
not
I
remember.
think it's minimal.
Go over and just look at the board, but
That's true. Lords of Waterdeep, I
could have
believe,
done that before the video.
does give you
Yeah,
an intrigue card. So that is nice. I like when it gives you at least some other reason to do it. And I believe Rajas of the Ganges also gives you
I think a fame,
which is
the
which is
larger
good.
of the two kind of points in the
Yes.
game.
So they do give you some things, but it's still, I don't know, they just never feel as fun to me. And I will say, this one's, even with Nova Roma, it's still not the funnest action, but it's nice.
It was that first player.
I believe it is right. Take one. Nope, that is not it. Maybe you can't take first player.
Maybe you can.
Maybe I'm falsely accusing it. I thought this one had it. Maybe it does not.
Might be another game.
I apologize.
Oh,
I
boy.
shouldn't have
we
called
are
it
so
out.
Sorry. We are so sorry. Take us very seriously, please.
Yes. Hello, we are back after we were done filming the video. Because we just had to know how the first player was determined in Champions of Midgard. Because we were so sure that it was. And we were right. It is determined. Based on
determined on that action
claiming.
that we were looking at. And we just
We
saw
just
the
didn't
one
know.
white die there and thought, oh, no, that's not it. But yeah, if you go to the longhouse, you collect that die from the supply, and you take the first player marker from whoever presently has it. So a classic, go to a spot, get the first player marker.
Yep.
But then it also says, which is interesting, which I don't know if we've ever played. I don't know if we've ever taken it in this situation, but
I'm not sure.
if you have the first player marker already, you must pass it to the player on your left. And that is the only way that the first player marker moves in the game, is to take that action. But that is something interesting, that if you go to the first player marker to gain the other bonus that it's giving you, and you have the first player, you have to pass it to the player on your left.
Which will make you last the next
Yes.
time. I can't see any way that would be worth taking that.
You really needed that die.
That is the only way, or if it was the very last round or something, I don't know.
But yeah, that one adds a little interest, I think.
It
to
does,
just
if
with
it's
that extra
never
thing.
moving.
Because there are times in worker placement games where you kind of don't really have any good actions out there, and that kind of, if you do have first player token, that's not really a good option.
Right.
But yeah, I don't see that would actually come up that often, that you would take it if you were first player. But
Right.
it is interesting that there is no way to for sure and protect it. If you are first player, you can't
Right.
continue to keep it.
So that's a good point, that you would have to move it over to the player on your left. So yeah, interesting shot or interesting thoughts. Yeah, let us know what you think about that, and we'll get back to the rest of the video.
Seriously, please.
Yes, for sure. Well, they'll take us a little more seriously with this next one, because I think this one is maybe one of the most interesting cases of a first player, and that is Azul.
Always going to get taken.
Yes, that one will get taken, and it's an interesting take, for sure. You will typically, I think every Azul game, when you take it, you lose points, outside of the fourth one, maybe.
Yeah.
But this one's an interesting one, because first player is quite important in Azul. Probably more
Yes.
important than almost any of these other games.
Yeah, it can be.
It can be.
It can be
depends.
very
It
important.
depends what comes out.
Otherwise, it can just be nice.
Yeah.
Depending on what comes out, like there could be. So in Azul, if you don't know Azul, you're drafting different tiles to then place and score with, and you usually want a large amount of certain types. So if in the new market, it's kind of all split and mixed up, except for one spot which maybe has 3 or possibly 4 of a kind. If you get the first grab at that is going to be a huge advantage, I would say.
Yeah, 100%. And it was interesting. I would say the way we played it, or play Azul, is a little bit different than maybe some
Yeah.
people that really are good at Azul play it. But we watched the World Series of Board Gaming, kind of the finals of the Azul tournament that they had. And it was very interesting to see that people would almost always immediately take that token, whether or not there was something still good for that
Yep.
round. They were the second player almost every time. Almost every time, not every time, but almost every time. They took just to have the first player for the next time, which I just found crazy that it was like that. But probably makes sense with
Yeah.
the game. So I do like that. Yeah, you'll lose a little. You'll lose. Well, in the first one, I think you just lose like 1 point, depending on
Yeah.
how many tiles you have
Yeah,
to get
because
rid of.
that's going to be at
But
least
at
one
least
negative point. It kind of bumps you along that track to possibly be more negative points.
Right, and then similarly in the second one, it bumps you on a different track, which is going to be at least 1 point. It could be more than that. It depends where you are on the broken glass track. And the third one, it depends how many you take with that.
Yep.
So that can be a good chunk of negative points.
So then you
So that's a little bit different.
So
even
then that's kind of
yet.
similar, like you said, like they take it so early in
Right.
the World Series of Board Gaming. It's like in the third one, you also might want to take it early and not grab as many tiles along with the first player token
Right.
from the middle, because the more you grab,
More
not going to
negative
be
points.
good for you.
hmm Yeah, so it's very interesting. Because, at least with the first one, you could grab, it doesn't matter how many you grab
Yeah.
with it, and it still just gives you the only one that's for sure going to be negative out of those ones you grab.
Yeah.
You could have more,
Yeah.
but the only one that's going to is that first player one. So I think that is probably my favorite use of a moving first player that
Yeah.
isn't just in general moving
I
around
would
the
say
table
that
each round.
that is definitely the most interesting
Mhm.
first player, because it's just interesting how you get it, because
Mhm.
it's going to happen to someone, and it's
Yeah.
usually not that punishing, but it is just enough that you don't really want it, but then at the same time you do want to be first player, because that can be a huge
Mhm.
advantage if you're really looking for certain tiles in the next round or something like that. It can be worth those negative points, and yeah, it does mix it up slightly in each version that it does it. Like you said, the
Mhm.
third one probably the most.
Yeah.
I think they just all have their own unique twist on it.
Yeah. But then we also have on here, well, I've got like Stone Age, which is similar to Nova Roma if no one bids for it. Or Stone Age, the first player is just moving around the table. So each round it'll just go to the next player. So that's what a lot of games do as well. I think I'm fine with that, but it does seem like sometimes some of those you might end up getting first player when it's not as important, and there's not really a way to mitigate that.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but at least that way you do get a chance at first chance at
Yeah.
actions and stuff.
Yeah, that one does guarantee that. I can't imagine what it would be like if you could get it, just especially with kind of those core three actions of
Yeah.
food and.
That's true.
I feel like you would get one of those, and then you'd get first player, and that would be what you would do every time, probably.
That's probably fair. That is
Maybe
probably
we
fair.
play it wrong, and those are just the most underpowered actions.
Yeah, it seems like those are usually the first to go. But yeah, sometimes you'll take I think it's the card. And,
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think a lot of them use that. I think that works pretty well. I think it's a pretty common thing. That way, it's really just taking out the element of someone having to take that action.
In a lot of games, which I mean you may have learned or will learn that we like you said, we don't value it that much first player in most games, or at least I don't. I just don't want that extra thing to think about, because a lot of the games that it does matter are also heavier, more complicated games, and I'm already trying to figure out what even I'm trying to do for myself. I don't really want to have to be like, okay, I don't even have it figured out, so I'm definitely not going to know that I must be first player.
Right.
So then I just kind of ignore it, and so I think that is a good way where it just passes. It's a little like, oh, just don't have to think about it.
Right.
And I personally would enjoy that in more games, because it is very often that just somewhere along the line, someone else ends up taking first player. It's just convenient, and then I'm never going to try to take it, so I'm always going to be near last, and once that happens, like every round, you're like, okay, maybe I should have taken the first player token.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's definitely for games that are round based.
Yeah,
But I would
yep.
say another one that we kind of brought up, and there's other ones like this as well, is like a Whistle Mountain or a Tapestry, where um, you're just kind of taking turns and you're having like these pass actions that kind of ends maybe a round for you, or in some way is kind of doing like just a rest or whatever you want to call it. But the game will just continue on, and it's not like now someone else becomes a start player or anything. It just keeps going and going and going. So you got those types of games as well. I think that works really nicely. I think that's probably my favorite. But obviously, it doesn't work as well when it is round based. Because usually there's a definite end to a round before a next round is opened up. So usually doesn't work for those types of games, but they're kind of similar in a way. Then here we've got Isle of Cats.
Oh, yes.
So that one, it's based on, so throughout the game you're going to be drafting cards and paying for them, and some of those cards have boots on them, and then you are playing, you'll be playing some potential baskets and boot cards, and whoever has the most boots that they've kind of bid in a way will become the
Of course,
first
you
player.
probably guessed it, gets to pick up cats first.
Yes, because
whoever has the most baskets and boots gets the cats.
Right. Well, you could have the most baskets and the least boots,
That's
and you
true.
get the last chance.
That is true. That is true.
But yeah, so that one
It's more,
it's interesting.
It's more of a bidding, for order of drafting, and it's kind of a first player type thing, but also not, because then that's kind of almost every bidding game.
Yeah.
Is that like Nidavellir is kind of that bidding with
In
your
a
coins
way,
to choose first at locations.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so kind of the bidding for your turn order, 5 tribes kind of has that as well. I think it's an interesting way to do it. And then obviously you can save up, especially in Isle of Cat specifically. You could save up, and if there's a cat that you really, really want, then you can go all in with all the boots that you've accumulated and hope that you have more than other players. But in that game, it is kind of unfortunate how if you just have like one less, you might have spent a ton of boots and still have less than another player.
It's like, oh, they really wanted that too.
That's unfortunate, because then you're out of. You don't get them back if you don't get it. So you spend them all either way.
Wore out your boots.
You wore them out. What do we got on here next? We've got Brass Birmingham, which is kind
of most forgettable.
Which is kind of similar as well, but not really. So each round you are taking actions typically, and you'll be spending money in one way or another. And then you're taking the money that you spent and comparing that to the money everyone else spent during that specific round. And then turn order is determined based on the amount of money people have or have spent, not have, but spent. And it's just kind of an interesting thing. I don't think I've probably played Brass enough to know why it is that way, or why that makes. I'm assuming there's a reason that's connected to the following turn order, but I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Just
haven't played it enough.
Basing on not really like who's doing well, because I know a lot of them will order like, okay, then whoever's in last is now first player. But this is what you just spent in the previous round is determining that. That is, like you said, I'm not sure exactly how that connects, but I'm sure there's a reason.
Yes. So let us know in the comments below if you're a big fan of Brass. It's the #1 game currently on Board Game Geek, so a lot of people do like it, so it must make sense. And then kind of alongside that, we've got Clans of Caledonia, which is you will be spending a lot of money, but it doesn't matter how much you've been spending. It's just whoever. Oh, wait a minute. Now that I think about it, I think whoever passes first just gets more money.
Oh yeah,
is that right?
That's right. Yep.
For some reason, I was thinking that was turn order, but it just has 1, 2. I don't think that actually goes to the next turn. But it's similar.
So it is similar. Yes.
Similar in a way. And then the last one we've got on here is Castles of Burgundy.
Yes, that is a track that you'll be a particular tile, which thankfully that is not the only benefit that it gives you. I think when you place the water tiles, you get to claim goods from the board,
Yep.
as well as move along a track, which that track determines who's going to be the first player going forward, whoever is farthest along the track. And I think when you move on to someone else's marker, which one is first between those two?
I think it's the person on top, I believe.
Okay, even though they got their second, which I think
Yes.
it was that, because I was like, really?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is kind of an ongoing track to determine who that is, and I thought I like that it's tied into a tile that has another ability.
Yep.
That's kind of similar to Nova Roma, where if it isn't just that, then it's so much more interesting, because
Yep.
that in and of itself is not of value to me. That's not really the game that I like. The game is all the other things that I'm doing to earn points. I don't want a little mini game of go get the first player token.
Yeah, I think this one, kind of with Azul and maybe Nova Roma can be thrown in there, are probably the most interesting and kind of flow in with other elements of the game versus just being one piece that you're having to either work towards or potentially keep track of. But I think it works pretty well. I think the only thing with this is, and then you're kind of maybe just doing it to yourself or allowing it to happen, so it's just on you as a player. But sometimes it seems like some people will get way ahead and then they'll just be the first player for a ton of rounds in a row. But that's just based on other players not. I mean, if you wanted to be first player, you likely. I mean, if you're probably playing, I guess I don't know. We recently got the deluxe edition, and it comes with a lot of different boards. I guess I don't know if you could technically be using different boards, I guess, or start up in different places. So maybe some people will have easier access than others.
To those or not, yeah.
But you should. I mean, I think you're supposed to play with the same ones typically, so you should have the same opportunities as the other players. So you really have no one to blame but yourself or your bad dice rolls.
Yeah.
Or just probably the dice's fault.
The starting of the game, if they just initially do go after those tiles first.
That's true, because there can be a limited amount of specific tile types. So that could be it as well. And then once they get there, they just keep taking them.
Just keep taking it.
Oh, those people.
But then, then again, I guess maybe that is why then the one on top does go first. So if someone just is first player to start the game, move along there. If you then move along, you do then top them.
Yeah.
So.
I think those are kind of the different types of first player selection we've kind of run into or seen. I think the slickest thing is just having a game that just keeps flowing and flowing.
Do you prefer it like that or by placement? Of kind of some of them have you reorder based on the amount of points that you have.
Oh, like Ethnos or something?
Yeah, I think Ethnos. After the Empire, I think kind of has that based on your gold. I guess, do you like that as kind of a catch-up mechanism?
I
would say that's it can get hard when you're kind of going out of kind of clockwise order.
Yes, I will say that is one thing about like a Castle of Burgundy that I don't love is when you start going kind of all over the place, or once the turn order. Yeah, if it's bid on or something like that, it can just start getting wonky of like, oh, they're next and they're next.
Yeah.
And some games do it better than others, make it a lot easier to remember based on maybe having to move a piece from a certain thing or something. But I would say that type of thing can get confusing, but I don't mind it like Ethnos and stuff going to the last place player, but I think it depends on the game too, because I guess that one in particular, could be the person in last and the person in first could be sitting next to him. Because then it just, after that initial start with that player, it just goes clockwise, I believe. So I don't know how big of a catch-up thing that is, but it's not the worst in that game. And determining order based on certain things, I like that sometimes as well. But they're all interesting. I think it's more interesting things like that typically are more interesting to me than maybe just having an action spot that you can claim first player. I think that,
yeah, I would say so too.
So, yeah, those are kind of our thoughts on first player. Falsely accusing some games of having these spots that they don't have. I just really felt like that was a thing.
I thought it was too.
It just very much felt like it, but I guess I don't. I was wrong. I was wrong.
We'll have to figure out how it's determined.
We will have to figure that out.
Or maybe it was on the board and we just were blind.
We might. It's a big board, so we might. Who knows? But yeah, we're doing a series of just these talks. So if it sounds interesting to you, if this has been interesting to you, leave us a thumbs up. If you've got any future things we could talk about that you would find interesting, leave them in the comments as well. Let us know what you think. What you think about first player markers? Do you go after it?
How much do you value it, or do you agree that it is usually overrated?
All right. Overrated. That is what we have claimed. It's kind of like busted. But yeah, otherwise, we hope to see you on our other videos. And as always, don't forget to
keep on nibbling
on our content.